Good evening, Baruchim Habayim Rabotai. Welcome to another edition of our Thursday night's class. Tonight's class was sponsored by Leilu Nishmat Yosef ben Rivka. Tehei nafsho tzurah b'tzorah chaim b'gan eden hayom v'ol tzadikim v'chasidim. Amen v'amen. Yeah, I don't know. Hashem is challenging us a little bit. Last week we had to talk about Miron, and now we have rockets flying into Israel, and I don't know what's going on over here. So even though you would think that Erev Matan Torah we would give a regular Matan Torah speech, which is much more appropriate. But the Rambam writes that when Am Yisrael's b'tzar and somebody doesn't, we don't talk about it and learn something from it on a practical implication. So it's a midat achzariyut. It's a heartless person. It's worse than heartless, evil, and that for sure we don't want to be. So we're going to try and somehow blend Matan Torah together with current events. We're going to try and make some sort of blend, Be'ezrat Hashem. Oh, Toda Rabba, Tiyubriya, Tibriya.
The fourth one here.
Thank you, Baruch Hashem. No. 4 Imahot is holy. Baruch Hashem.
They say it's going to be a holy
I know. So let's see what we can do. Oh, now we have a Chamsa. A little more and I'll be here all night. I don't know. It's going to be interesting, yeah, Baruch Hashem. So, I'm sure everybody's been following the news and whatever, and if you live in Brooklyn, so you might have encountered today a bunch of Palestinian protesters and a bunch of Harvard graduates protesting with them on Ocean Parkway, and in the name of sticking up for people that shoot rockets, attacking Jews. And yesterday, what happened in Manhattan, they beat up a Jewish guy, the cops are there, and tens of the cops are there, and the cops can't even tell them anything because they're scared. Because otherwise we're going to have Muslim lives matter soon, So they pretty much bet politely, maybe you want to go to a social worker and see if they could help you out a little bit. And you stop beating up Jews. That's what we got to. It's a little crazy. That's in America. But in Israel, I want to give you a little wake-up call and put things in perspective. I've said in the past, and I'm proud of this, I come from a family that a lot of us had long military careers. I had the shortest of everybody. But I'm not an Israeli citizen, whatever, so I did whatever it was. But the majority of my family members had long military careers. And I say that with pride because, of course, those who are going to learn Torah, obviously, that's the highest thing. But if not, what could be more precious to Hashem than people willing to sacrifice their lives to protect His children? These are tzaddikim, these soldiers. Literally tzaddikim. They don't know themselves that they're tzaddikim. When Shamayim, they're tzaddikim. And let's put things in perspective a little bit. We're sitting and laughing, life's going on, Baruch Hashem, more or less okay. Maybe we look behind our back a little bit in New York, but besides for that, life goes on okay. Well, right now in Israel, over 1 million people are sleeping in bomb shelters. Being woken up every few minutes by sirens and by alerts. Over 1 million people that are sleeping in bomb shelters. Over 4.5 million people are under the threat of bomb sirens. That's more than half the population. And this is going on for 3 days already. I lost count because it's hard to keep up. These terrorists are pretty good at what they do, unfortunately. But as of a few hours ago, they were up to 1,870 rockets that landed in Israel. That's besides for the ones that didn't make it over the border and landed on them. Yeah, there was a few hundred of those too. And what drives me nuts every time again is that you open the news in America, or in Europe is even worse, and what are the headlines? Israel bombs Gaza. Israel bombs Gaza. That's not a memo that I'm aware of. Israel doesn't bomb anybody. Israel is trying to defend themselves from lunatics that are showering missiles more than raindrops. It's insane. Literally insane. And if things like this happen, it's easy to translate it into politics and the left and this and that, which is all true, by the way. But we understand that everything's from Hashem, so that means Hashem's behind all this. Hashem is doing this. And if Hashem's doing it, that means Hashem wants something. He doesn't do things for nothing. Ein dayan v'lo din, ein din v'lo dayan. There's no judge without judgment. There's no judgment without a judge. Because Baruch Hu is dan din emet, and if he's doing it, there's something going on. So again, I give the same disclaimer as last week. I'm not God. I wasn't hired as his spokesman. He didn't come to me in a dream, and he didn't share what the reason why. All we can do is use what the Nevi'im, the holy prophets, and the Gemara teaches us about these subjects to learn. That's the extent of what we can do. Beyond that, we can't do anything else. But that's for sure. We have to pause and think. Adavar hazeh omer darsheni. This needs an answer. What's going on over here? Number two, why are they attacking us in America? In Israel, okay, they're in the middle of war. It's not okay, it's tragic. But what do you want from us in New York? Why are every single synagogue that's responsible, as we speak now, have emergency meetings of their committee to hire extra security for Shabbat and the holiday? Because they're scared. I'm not talking about one or two. I'm on the board of multiple synagogues myself. It's crazy. If somebody would tell you 5 years ago that's what we're going to get to in New York, you would have said, what? Never. We're the land of the free. The media opens up their headlines with the picture of the kid in Gaza that was used as a human shield that got killed accidentally from an Israeli Air Force plane that took down a building, and forgets that thousands, not one, not two, not hundreds, thousands of Israeli Arabs that are living off Jewish tax dollar, that have the best life they can, that do nothing and get free money from the government, are going into the towns of Israel for 4 nights straight already, burning everything they see, causing mass destruction, and unfortunately they already killed 6 people, besides for all the wounded. 7 people? Mach shemam, even worse. Last night they went, 2 idiots, into a building in Haifa, in a religious Orthodox neighborhood. They lit 3 cars on fire, and from smoke inhalation, 59 people, Hasidic people from the religious community, were hospitalized. What do they want? The newborn baby, there's a 3-week-old baby was one of them. A 3-week-old baby definitely didn't do anything wrong. Definitely is not occupying any territory. Besides, historically, the whole thing's a joke. And if this is happening, it's not them doing it. It's Hashem letting it happen. If Hashem didn't want it, it wouldn't happen. It's it's a pele. The whole thing's a pele. And we do see huge miracles in the whole story. If 1,800, by now it's unfortunately I think a lot more, but if 1,800 missiles would hit New York, you can imagine what the death count would be. God forbid should never happen. 1,800 missiles go towards a country, and 1 human life is already a tragedy. I'm not downplaying, but relatively to the scheme of what happened in the last 3.5 days, there's countless miracles. Countless miracles. One of them that stood out to me was, I watched an interview with a lady, and a mother and a daughter. It touched my heart. The first day of this rocket insanity, her house was not hit directly, but got the windows shattered as a result of a rocket that fell nearby. Now, the law in Israel is the government pays for anything that gets damaged through a terrorist attack. But that law is a double-edged sword, because they pay for it in full, no questions asked, but they have to assess it also. Now, during a time of war, you can't fix your house because nobody's coming to assess anything when there's rockets flying. So she left her house because a few windows were shattered, and she wasn't going to stay home without windows. Less than 24 hours later, a direct hit to her house with a rocket. If the windows would have not shattered the day before, she wouldn't be here to say the story. Not religious lady, together with her daughter that she's staying by, we're both interviewed. I saw the interview. And she says, I'm not a religious Jew, but it's so clear to me that what yesterday made me angry at God, today is making me bless God. Right? The first day, what does happen? Windows shattered, now I have to wait till the assessor comes, till we get the money, can't do anything, can't touch anything. Less than 24 hours later, she said, wait, God saved my life. That's what he did. He got me out of the house. And like this, there's countless miracles every minute. Against all odds, against everything. It's unreal. Even this Iron Dome thing that everybody's talking about, that alone is a miracle. We're busy saying the Iron Dome is helping. The Iron Dome's not helping anything. Hashem gave the brilliance that there's the only country in the world that succeeded to develop a thing for short-range missiles, and I'm specifically saying short-range because I don't want to get the responses tomorrow, you're wrong, there's other countries that have things anti-missile. Yeah, every country has anti-missile stuff, but that's for long-range missiles. For short-range rockets, Israel's the only country in the world that made a decision that wasn't an accepted decision. If you know the history of the Iron Dome, everybody was against it. It was one person who was a minister for a very short period of time, who was an inexperienced person in military matters. It's a guy who came from the Union at all. He knew about financial protests and riots and strikes. That's what he knew in his life. And liked the idea of developing the Iron Dome. And because he was ignorant in military terms, that's why he went and got the funding for it, and that's how they have it. If anybody who had a military background would have been the decision maker there, it would have never happened. Because Israel had many opportunities to develop this in advance, and they didn't do it, because it didn't make sense financially in many other ways. That means Hashem literally took a person who's uneducated, put him into uneducated in this area, I'm not saying in general, in this area, put him into a field that he knows nothing about, allowed him to become the Minister of Defense of a country that's always at war. The whole thing's absurd, right? It makes no sense. How could that be? Just so he should be the one that won't have the brains to stop this, and this will later on save his kids. Miracle after miracle after miracle. But at the same time, there's a lot of tsar. Tonight, 3 hours ago, until now the Israelis were retaliating by bombing from the air. F-35s and that, you know. That's a relatively safe way to fight a battle. Tonight they sent in ground troops. Unfortunately, that's not a good thing, because Hashem should watch over, should be more miracles, but ground troops is always a scary thing, and look what America had in their adventures in Iraq and Afghanistan and other places. It's ground, nobody wants ground troops. Boots on the ground is the worst thing. But besides for these soldiers, Hashem will send an angel to protect them, they should be protected. We have to think past that sometimes in life. Think about their mothers. Those of you who are a parent, you know what it means to be a parent. You think their mothers are sleeping tonight? These are kids that are not allowed to have their cell phones with them because they can't have the enemy be able to track them. So they have no contact with their parents. For days now, their own parents are not going to know if their kid is alive or dead. I'm going to live in constant worry and panic. We sit and party. And when is this happening? Over Yom Tov. Shavuot's coming up. That means Israel's going into a holiday under war. What was different this time than the previous ones? You know, rockets are always flying into Israel, unfortunately. But the difference was that this was a threat over Har HaBayit. They threatened the deadline time. These terrorists think they're going to dictate to the world what's going to happen. If by 6 o'clock you're not going to do this and this, then they keep on putting time. And for the first time in many, many years, they sent 7 missiles. Thank God they didn't hit, but they tried, to Jerusalem. That's how this mess intensified, we'll call it. That's when Israel decided it's time to retaliate. Now, Jerusalem is the capital of the Jewish nation. I want to know, I wish I had a way to direct this question to Mr. Biden, if 7 missiles were sent by North Korea to Washington, D.C. right now, what would America do? They wouldn't go to war. They would nuke the country, as they've done in the past. And that wouldn't even be a question. But when 7 missiles hit the capital of the Jewish nation, the only land that the Jews have in the world, after being persecuted for thousands of years, he sends emergency people to go calm the Israelis down and tell them they have to stop. With some measly comment, Israel has the right to defend themselves, but they shouldn't kill civilians. That's like saying you have the right to drive a car, but don't have gas. Now, I disagree 100% with Mr. Biden on anything and everything that exists. But I will give him credit where his credit is deserved. His voting record when it comes to Israel matters has been relatively good over the years. And he's been in politics a lot of years, so he has a very long record. Meaning he's not an anti-Israel person. We definitely don't suspect him to be as such. And he's not showing a lot of love and compassion. If Trump would have been in office now, you understand, the fire and fury comments would have came. There would have been American troops on the way to Israel already to assist. That's what would have been going on. And in case you think I'm exaggerating, he can't tweet anymore because, you know, of course in America we don't believe in democracy, so we shut down those who are inconvenient for us. But he has his own platform now, so he posted himself. If I would have been in office, this wouldn't happen because they know exactly what I would have done. Pele. So the whole thing, I'm not here to give you news. Go watch the news yourself. It's important when Israel's at war to watch the news, by the way. Not CNN, God forbid. A right-wing media outlet. But I'm coming to understand what's the spiritual message here. What does Hashem want? Where's that? So again, missiles targeted towards Jerusalem over a dispute on Har HaBayit instigates terrorists to start raining rockets at us. We have to respond. Unfortunately, there's already a cost to life. Let's hope there's no more cost to life. A lot of fear. And the world, as usual, is against us. And not the Muslim world, surprisingly. Most of the Muslim world is quiet. Because they agree with us. They're the ones who are making peace with us. The European world, the ones that call themselves the educated ones, the more advanced ones, they're the ones who are attacking us in the media all day. They're the ones who are allowing this nonsense. So obviously there has to be a meaning. No, so we know, Gaon Vilna writes, two places, but the one that's more known is in the Akdamat Sefer Tzniuta. We quoted this many times. Anything that happens in history was already written in the Torah based on what Chazal say, like a midi lo ramizi bo'oraita. There's nothing that wasn't said in the Torah. The Gaon says that many of the stories that the Nevi'im told us that don't seem simply like prophecies were said solely for the purpose of predicting the future and giving Jews the tools and the attitude when needed of how to deal with things in the future. So obviously there got to be somewhere in the Torah that talks about all this. So there's more than one place. There's a lot of places. With the time we have, we'll try and just look a little bit and see where Matan Torah plays a big factor, because the timing of this is no coincidence. So Navi says in Yechezkel in the 38th chapter, right at the beginning, Vayhi dvar Hashem elai. There's a prophecy. The words of God were to me. Ben Adam sim panecha el Gog, Eretz Hamagog, Nesi Rosh Meshech v'Tuval, v'inabe alav v'amarta. This is where the prophet of Yechezkel talks about the war of Gog and Magog. כה אמר השם אלוקים, הנני עליך גוג, נשיא ראש משך ותובל, ושפבתי ונתתי חיים בחייך. What does that mean? So Rashi explains, I'm going to put in this leader, or the king, or whatever, the ruler, whatever you want to title him, in his heart, thoughts, and I'm going to pull you to the direction of coming to fight against Israel. This is. And the Navi goes on to details, based on the terms that they used to use then in war. והוצאתי אותך ואת כל חייליך סוסים ופרשים. I'm going to take you and your army and whatever. You know. Today, parashim is a term that the Israeli military uses for tanks. And the Navi goes on about it. And then the Navi names different people, amongst them, Paras, Iran, the first country to bash publicly Israel, the first second anything started, was the Iranians. Hazit is none left to the country. Israel's shutting their electric, turning on their electric. So they get a chance to say something bad about Israel, they always jump on it. And other ones and whatever. And the Navi goes on to explain all different things, what's going to happen and how, and how's it going to happen. And on which Israel are we talking about? Eretz Yisrael. What do I mean, which Israel? Which era of Israel? So Navi says an interesting thing. Eretz meshuvevet micherev mekubetzet me'amim rabim. Rashi explains, what does that mean? It's a land of Israel, but not just the land of Israel. At a time that the people that were exiled for a long time now returned as one from all different places because of the sword of the enemy. What was the, beyond the initial Zionistic thoughts, one of the biggest contributing factors to the state of Israel being approved in the United Nations, to one extent or the other, not that we care, and then mass migration from all over the world in a relatively short period of time to Israel at the end of the 1940s, World War II. Jews felt that they have no home. That was the whole case for Israel on the global platform. So the prophet says, we're going to talk about Israel at a time that it's settled. When is it settled? When people come from exile from all over the world as a result of being persecuted by enemies in other countries. I think that's pretty clear and undisputable that we're talking about the state of Israel today. Historically, this is the only time that it happened under those circumstances. There were other times we were in Israel, but in a mass migration as a result of that. And then the Navi goes on to say how the nations of the world are going to fight us and whatever. If you look in the details, it's actually interesting. We have to look with the commentaries. And there are many prophecies like this in Yechezkel, by the way, that go along this theme. Yechezkel Navi spoke about it a lot. One of the things that this time is complicating things is not only that they're bombing us, it's the uprise of over 1 million ungrateful Muslims that live in Israel that are causing chaos on our streets. Very interesting thing. When the Navi discusses this time, this battle that's going to happen, the Navi says, Ko amar Hashem Elokim, this is what Hashem said. Vaya bayom hahu, on that day, Ya'alu dvarim al levavecha v'chashavta machshevet ra'ah. Things are going to come on your heart and you're going to think bad things. Va'amarta e'eleh al eretz prazot avo al hashoktim. He's not talking about the Jews, bad things. The enemy is going to think bad thoughts. I'm going to come to this land that gathered those that were exiled to Israel. Avo hashoktim yoshvei lavetach. I'm going to come to those who are sitting peacefully, living good. Overall, Israel's living good. This actually came at a time that Israel was technically their first global milestone that is going to be studied in history in years from now. Our great-grandchildren will study this. The first country in the world to come out of a pandemic and reopen completely and have 0 sick rate, 0 hospitalization rate, everything 0, life goes on. Like nothing ever happened. Right? This is exactly when, a few weeks ago, we spoke in the Shiur what a miracle Hashem did to the Eretz Yisrael, the first country to be done with this, to start getting life back. They thought they were getting life back, and Aleinu, one hit after another. Kulam yoshvim be'ein choma bariach udlatayim ein lehem. They're all sitting without walls and doors with locks they don't have. What does that mean? Everybody lives with a door and with a lock and this and that. So many Mefarshim try to explain it. Different ones say different things what that means. Most of them go with the theme of it's symbolic to the idea of they feel relatively secure. I say a very simple thing. They put us all into a prison in the past year and a half. It's called a mask. And when Israel got out of their pandemic, they removed the mask law, at least in public places, outdoors. And everywhere else it's not enforced. Otherwise known as removed it without saying so. Originally it was enforced very strongly over there. It's like now, in the past few weeks. People started feeling free again, feeling normal again. But what is this enemy going to come do? So normally an enemy comes to kill, to fight, which is what they're doing in part. But this time it was different, we said. And the Navi predicts it. Lishlol shalal v'lavoz vaz u'lashiv yadcha al charavot noshafot v'al musaf me'agoyim. And it goes on. You're not only going to come to fight them, to kill them, you're also going to come with swords, knife stabbings, exactly what's been going on the streets. And lishlol shalal, to go after materialism, assets that they own, destruction of burning cars and all these other things which sound symbolic in the bigger picture, but it's great chaos. It causes great fear and chaos. And this is the Navi that's talking about the war of Gog and Magog. That's the war that Mashiach comes through. I'm not here to say it is Gog and Magog. Yeah, don't hold me on that. I'm just reading you a Navi and you do it whatever you want. I gave you the source, study it on your own. Whatever you want to conclude. But at least we see clearly that this is not a far-fetched concept. And Hashem, but the good news is, Hashem says an interesting thing. He says when that's going to happen, God says He's going to get angry. Obviously it's a parable. It's just so we could relate to it. God doesn't get angry. And He says, on that day is going to be Rash Gadol al Admat Yisrael. A lot of noise on the land of Israel. You have to know what that means. And there's a big description about this noise. And then it says, about staircases falling, walls collapsing, a lot of things that happen. But okay, that could be argued because it's happened many times before historically in Israel. And then it says another thing. "V'karati alav l'chol harei charev neum Hashem Elokim charev ish be'achiv tiyeh." I'm going to call a fight. What's this fight going to be? Charev ish be'achiv. One with another, a man with his brother. Right now there's a unique battle, not in the terrorist sense. That's very normal for Israel. But in two other senses. On a Jewish front, we're in the worst civil climate that we ever were in Israel. There's almost a civil war there. And not in action, but in politics. They went through 4 elections without there's no government until now, after 4 elections in 2 years. A 5th to come shortly. And now it's clear there's not going to be a government, whatever. I got to say, Rav Don Segal spoke 2 weeks ago, and they asked him before the speech that they're very nervous, that it seems like there'll be a left-wing government because Netanyahu didn't succeed to make a government, and what's going to be, and this and that. Rav Don said it's recorded. You can find it on a Israeli religious website called Charedim, sorry. So they have the video of the speech, the whole speech. And he said, Rav Don said, I use my Ruach HaKodesh for better things than that. Interesting, Rav Don never talks that way. Never. I know Rav Don since I'm a young child, very personally. But I will say this, they're not going to succeed to make a left-wing government. Then it looked like it was the first day that Lapid got the thing to make a government. It was for sure he's doing it. It's not a question. So many people hate Netanyahu. What's the question? It sounded very far-fetched, to the point I'm embarrassed to admit. But I told one of my close acquaintances, if not for the fact that I have blind faith in Chachamim, I would say that there's no chance. It's completely off. Suddenly today, the whole political map changed as well. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of animosity between the right and the left, or you don't even know what's the right and left in Israel anymore, but between the pro-Netanyahu and anti-Netanyahu people, we'll call it. Cherev ish b'achiv. People, they're ready to kill each other. Lieberman's whole campaign before this last election in Nisan, Yud Nisan, we said the day that Hashem said to take the idols of Egypt before Yitziat Mitzrayim, which resembles Biat Mashiach. Ki meitzitcha me'eretz Mitzrayim e'erenu niflaot. The same way you came out of Egypt, I'm going to take you out from Galut when Mashiach comes. His whole campaign was anti-religious Jews. Stop the funding for yeshivot, stop the Cherev ish b'achiv, fighting with each other. Literally fighting with each other. He said they should send them on the mizbulot, into the sanitation. They should take the yeshiva boys and throw them all in the garbage. They don't have to go to the garbage. All they got to do is sit in his office. They got the ultimate garbage. It's worse than the garbage. But it's not pleasant. Hashem doesn't like when Jews fight. And on the enemy end, it's also cherev ish b'achiv. And this never happened in the years that the state of Israel was around before. Till now, every time we had a conflict with Gaza or with any of these terrorists, the whole Muslim world gathered together and denounced Israel day and night non-stop in all their media outlets and everything. Right now, the United Arab Emirates has a peace treaty with Israel. Bahrain has a peace treaty with Israel. Saudi Arabia is about to sign a peace treaty with Israel. Yemen's about to sign a peace treaty, and none of them want to ruin it. So they're biting their tongue to stay quiet. And the Palestinians are getting angry. Wait a minute, you're supposed to back us. And so far they're holding up. Yeah, they could save themselves b'mot Mashiach just over this. So it's also cherev ish b'achiv. First time that within the Muslim world they're fighting over right and wrong now. More than that, I don't understand the dynamics of terrorists and terrorist minds, thank God. But there are people that are trained in school for a lot of years to study and analyze these things. But the way this was analyzed is that the Hamas was scared that Abu Mazen's about to have a democratic election, and they didn't want to lose their control and their dictatorship. And that's why they started instigating everything, so there should be an internal fight, and the elections obviously were canceled and whatever, and they got what they wanted. So even within Gaza and those areas, they're fighting with each other. Actually, the stats show that the majority of the civilians of Gaza are very anti everything that's going on, because they feel it's a dictatorship destroying their own lives. Another version of cherev ish b'achiv. And then God talks about how he's going to take care of the problem. And he says, what's he going to send? He's going to send down Eish v'gofrit antir alav. Fire and fury, as Trump said, more or less. It's not in a direct translation. in Makat Barad, there was, Chazal say, the Pasuk says, there was fire that came down from heaven. But since then, there's not much fire historically that comes down from heaven. Maybe shooting stars or whatever, it doesn't come down to us on fire. What's Eish v'gofritam tiralav? Remember, there's a Navi, it was written thousands of years ago. It wasn't today that we understand what technology could bring. What's going on? The Israeli bombers are in the air, raining back fire and fury. Bombs. What are they doing to us? Rockets, same idea, fire and fury. Just a few years ago, this would have sounded, 100 years ago, this would have sounded so far-fetched. Literally what's happening. Hashem says, this is why I'm going to fight war with you. And at the end, Hashem concludes, in this piece of the Navi, Vitgadati, Vitkashti, B'toch B'nai Yisrael, that's going to glorify God's name. Why did I quote the psukim of this Tanakh, which honestly I would hope that most people knew before I quoted it? Because of the Malbim. The Malbim in chapter 32 in Yechezkel, Pasuk Yud Zayin. I'm giving sources in case anybody wants to check afterwards that my information is precise. It says an interesting thing, I'm quoting word for word from the Malbim. Hinei be'et ketz, behold in the time of Mashiach, in the time of the end. Achal shekvar yeshvu Yisrael al admat Yisrael. After the Jews will already dwell in the land of Israel. Atidim haumot litasef v'lichbosh et Yerushalayim. The nations are going to come to try and conquer Jerusalem. This fight started over Jerusalem. V'yavo Gog nesi Meshech v'Tuval me'altzot hatzafon. I don't know who these rulers are, so I'm not going to distort things that I don't know. And va'arelim hanikreim Edom. Edom, we clearly know that's Europe. Umeshech v'Tuval. And then the Malbim clearly writes, Be'eropa, in Europe, the word, literally the word, to come make problems over Jerusalem. They're going to come making trouble over Jerusalem. And who else? What are they going to come to back? Sorry. So the Malbim writes, they're going to come to back people that are kulam nimolim, that are circumcised, machzikim bedat Yishmaelim, that are part of the Muslim religion. Not just this fight started out over Jerusalem, it started out over Har HaBayit, what the Muslims think is holy to them. Their ugly golden dome. And they're going to join together with Bnei Edom, meaning join doesn't have to be in combat. Join means that they're getting the backing, whether it's the financial backing that Biden announced a couple of weeks ago that he's starting to fund again the United Nations, and he's starting to fund again Palestinians and other terrorists, or whether it's Europe that sends countless money there through UNRWA and other corrupt organizations. And they're going to come to conquer Jerusalem, Yad Yisrael, from the Jews. Aval bevoam, but when they come to do it, when they think they're actually going to do it, Ya'aseh benehem me'umah. There's going to be chaos between them. V'yilachamu ish be'achiv, hainu Edom v'Yishmael. And the Muslim world and the European world are going to end up fighting with each other instead of being able to waste their time fighting with Israel. Yilachamu zeh bazeh mipnei she'emunatam meforedet. They're going to fight with each other because their faith is different. Now that sounds a little bit removed from today's world, right? Because today there's no faith in nothing. The faith is not even in the dollar anymore because it's not worth anything anymore. So what's the only people that still fight in the name of their faith? Historically, the Christians did mass murders in the name of their faith. That's gone for many, many years. The only religion that's still left killing people in the name of God is Allah Akbar, these Muslims. Only ones left. And they don't stop with that. And the only part of the Western civilization that will stand up against them are specific sects amongst the Christian world, primarily evangelic people and others, that believe that in order for their fantasy of J.C. Penney coming to be their Messiah, they need the Jews to first live peacefully in Israel. Whatever, I'm not here to give you a lesson in their religion. So they have their own faith that is agenda-based to back Israel. AKA Nikki Haley, which did a great job for Israel, Donald Trump, and many others. That's just a few examples. There have been many throughout history that have done a lot of good things for Israel because of that belief. But what's the problem with that? There's a conflict of interest. Emunatam meforedet. So even though originally it seems like they're all against us, at one point it's going to blow up in the face. They can't go together. Yilachamu ish ba'achiv. And then they're going to end up fighting with each other. And that's actually what's going to save us from a mess. And then the Malvim goes on saying how Hashem's going to make that it's going to happen that the Jews will be saved. No. So now I wanted to make a very simple observation. We can almost call it a pre-K observation. A teacher in pre-K should be teaching the young children this. If something says on a caution it's hot, and you touched it and you got burnt, you don't ask, why did I get burnt? It said it's hot. You decided that you're smarter and you touched it, so you got burnt. If something looks like an ice cube and you touched it and you got burnt, then you wonder, wait a second, wasn't it supposed to be cold? Why did I get burnt? That means, if Chazal and the Nevi'im, the prophets, and then later on the rabbis, clearly said that there's going to be a situation and something very specific is going to happen with a lot of details, and then it happens, it's not a question on God, why is it happening? It's a case for God, that God already said, yeah, this is exactly what's going to happen. It's a chizuk in emunah, it's not the other way around. And that's why it's so important to see that Chazal discussed these battles that are going to happen with the Muslims in Israel. So not only isn't it a question in emunah, even though it's hard to hear and see what's going on, it's actually a very, very big chizuk in emunah. And not only a chizuk in emunah, it's a chizuk in the idea of biat HaMashiach. Sometimes we get so caught up with our day-to-day problems and craziness and headaches and drama and whatever, we forget that there's a Rebbeinu Shalom and there's a purpose to this world, and the ultimate purpose is that one day there should be Yom Adin HaGadol after Biat HaMashiach, and we should have an Olam Shekulo Tov, a world that has only good. And it's very easy to forget that. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu said already in advance, yeah, this is the way it's going to be, and these things are going to happen. What does it have to do with Shavuot? But so, again, I'm not saying this as a spokesman of God, nor am I saying this to be insensitive or sensitive to anybody. I'm just quoting facts. Rav Gershon Edelstein was asked in a shiur that he was giving a week ago about the Miron tragedy. If I would have not watched it myself, I wouldn't quote it because I wouldn't believe that he said this. The Litvish normally don't elaborate on subjects like this, so when they do, it's extremely surprising. And this shiur was last week, Thursday, Israel time. Looking a few days further, you see how Hashem gives the Gdolei Yisrael prophecy. It's not prophecy, it's Ruach HaKodesh. Prophecy that we don't have today. And his response was, we don't know the calculations of God, but that for sure, that 45 people from the best amongst us, from the purest amongst us, were taken while doing a mitzvah, and that we spoke about last week, very, very high level of Kedusha. It's maybe even as high, if not, it's definitely as high, it could be even higher than somebody who died al Kiddush Hashem. Didn't happen because they sinned or because they have a problem. No, they were holy, holy people. It happens to protect, his words were, hundreds of thousands of Jews in the near future from a war that could happen. It didn't take a few days, and we have to bank on miracle after miracle. Frightening. Frightening. Kadayu Rab Shimon lismoch alav v'shat adchak. That's how he started off last week's shiur. He said, what happened to Rab Shimon that we somech alav v'shat adchak? I'm not saying this is a fact. I don't know. And I really am very cautious because I don't want it to be insensitive to families that lost loved ones. I have friends that died there last week, 2 weeks ago. But maybe these were the people that are protecting us. Maybe the reason why there is an Israel today in 1800 and whatever, by now it's probably much more, unfortunately, rockets didn't flatten Israel, is because these tzaddikim went from this world up to Shamayim and are able to protect Am Yisrael with their koach hatzidkut. From them that their only sin was they went to get close to Hashem by Hashem by Yochai. And there is a concept like that in Chazal many times. Hashem goes down and takes, Chazal say, the tzaddikim to protect the rest of the Jewish nation. B'cholem Wasserman, before he was killed with his students, Hashem Yinkom Damo in the Holocaust, told his students that we are dying today, so later on Jews will be able to live in America. They shouldn't be killed. he was able to see, B'ruach Kodsho, that Kodesh Baruch Hu had to take them to protect later on. That a lot of times when people talk to me about ethics and this and all that nonsense that they come with their agenda-based stuff and racism and feminism, each one with their craziness, I tell them, before we talk about any ethics, let's just say this. 70-something years ago, 6 million Jews gave their lives that you should be able to live as a Jew today. And you don't even behave like a Jew. So what's left? And you're talking to me about ethics? First, clear up that ethical issue, then we'll continue the discussion. But up till then, sorry, nothing to talk about. But Afal Pikein, further. So, the very famous Chaim HaKadosh, we quote it in different contexts, different times. Probably should be quoted every day, many times. Chaim HaKadosh asks, by Yetziat Mitzrayim, we make such a big deal from the water splitting and that, Az Yashil Moshe, until today we celebrate the miracle. But if you look in the Gemara, there are other stories of rabbis in different times that went to the water, then there was no bridge, so they made a bridge. You know, they said, Nahar, Prokliet Meimecha, split, and they split the water. There was one rabbi who split it 3 times in a row, once for him, once for somebody else behind him that he felt bad for, and then he saw an Arab. And he said he doesn't want the Arab to hate the Jews, saying they only care about themselves, so he split it for the Arab too, 3 times in a row. So Chaim HaKadosh asked, what's the big deal? Moshe Rabbeinu, Hashem gave him a miracle to split the water. Big deal. See, the rabbis did it all the time. I think Rabbi Tzia says one of the rabbis not only forget about split the water, he turned the direction of the waves the other way around. He said the river that runs this way should run that way to prove his point that he's right. Meaning they control the water. So Chaim HaKadosh says, and this is what we take something from Matan Torah, even though unfortunately we have to speak about all this other stuff, that it's not a question. Why is it not a question? Because Moshe Rabbeinu did it without Torah. It was before Matan Torah. That's a miracle. But once the Torah was given, the koach of the Bria, the koach of the nature of what Hashem created, was given, Masur bidei chachamim. It's given to the hands of the Talmidei Chachamim. So of course the rabbis were able to split the waters. They were Talmidei Chachamim. Right now in Israel, when there's a war going on, there's soldiers that are fighting on the ground and in the air, tzaddikim, Hashem should watch over them. And there's another military. And without the other military, these soldiers wouldn't make it up in the air, forget about being able to bomb. 196,000 yeshiva students and kollel students that are sitting and learning, even during these circumstances. Hashem gave the Talmidei Chachamim the koach. And when these Talmidei Chachamim wake up in the morning and come to shul and pray shacharit and say a Tehillim afterwards and say, Acheinu kol beit Yisrael antunim batzara u'bashiva umdim ben bayam ben bayabasha ben ba'avir. Our brothers that are in a tzara, hamakom yirachem aleim, Hashem should have mercy on them. Hashem says, you have the power of Torah, you control the nature. You said so, I do. Literally. I, on a personal level, understand the extent of how literal this is, a little more than the average person, just from personal family experience. My grandfather's yahrzeit Saturday night, Rabbi Yaakov ben Malkai, he was a big Kabbalist. If you want, light a candle, do a mitzvah, it's a good thing. He'll pray for you from heaven, I'm sure. Big Baal Mofet also. So, in the 67 war, my grandfather lived in a neighborhood today, it's known as Kiryat Sanz. But then it was the border. There were 3 buildings only there, now it's a whole built-up place, whatever. Used to be the girls' Beit HaMikdash was there in that neighborhood, called BJJ. I think they moved since, but for many years it was there. There was 3 buildings. It's a war. Bombs coming in. He's on the border, the worst place to be. And everybody went to the bomb shelters. When they went to the bomb shelters, he went downstairs, and he saw it's a small bomb shelter, close to 200 people inside. Men, women, children. He felt that for his kedusha, it's not for him. So he found a different bomb shelter. The grandfather used to wear his talit and tefillin only in the morning by shacharit and for an hour after when he learned. But then he would take it off. Some people wore all day tzaddikim. He didn't. Then, during those days of the war, he wore his talit and tefillin, and he told the younger ones that if they want, they can go to the bottom shelter. But the older ones he took with him, and instead of staying indoors, which is the responsible thing to do, he said, that's not my ishtadlut. He went outdoors and went to walk to where the soldiers were. He was walking like that on the enemy line, back and forth. And every time they would tell him, save yourself, you're an older man, it's dangerous, whatever. He would say, wherever I walk, nothing's going to be able to cross. And Kiryat Sanz wasn't hit. Not even from live fire, nothing. No missiles, no bombs, nothing. It's a shame he didn't walk faster. He could have walked around the whole Israel. It would have saved a lot of problems. So I'm not old enough, obviously, to have seen that story. But I heard it. Once I asked my grandfather about it. My grandfather never admitted the things that he did. Because he was very humble. He used to try to cover up. So I went there. I said, Saba, listen, it's not going to help you. I'm the grandson from America. I'm named after you. I got to know what's going on over here. I need the tricks to the trade. What is this? I got him in a good mood. Told me in Arabic, Ya Ibni, my son, come, let me teach you. Sat down with me. Showed me in the Zohar and another Sifrei Kabbalah, kavanot that you could have to stop the enemy. And then he told me in anger, not anger, in pain, that many times when Israel had problems, he asked that they should get him a plane to fly around the borders of Israel, and he said there would be no problem, he would stop it right away. But they think that he's an old man who's senile, they don't want to do it for him. So really it sounds like some wild miracle story. Guess what? It's not. I believe innocently that a 16-year-old yeshiva boy could do the same. Because the Chaim HaKadosh says that from the day the Torah was given, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave the rules of nature bidei Chachamim, in the hands of the Talmidei Chachamim. So if the people that are Lomdei Torah and Amidei Torah and this, so on one hand, it's very sad that right around Shavuot this is the craziness that Israel has to go through. Very, very sad. But on the other hand, there's good news to it too. That if it had to happen already, at least it didn't happen like the last one that was during Av, when Am Yisrael's luck is not so good. This is happening right around the time of Matan Torah, Shloshet Yimei Hagbala, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, you're close to me, when Koach HaTorah is strongest, when the Olam HaYeshivot are learning more than ever. Hachana for Matan Torah, how do you prepare for Matan Torah? Sorry to disappoint, not by buying cheesecakes. That's a preparation to be fat. If you want to prepare for Matan Torah, you prepare for Matan Torah by learning Torah. In Olam HaYeshivot, now, fire. Eish Torah, the fire of the Torah. So Dafka now, out of all times, if it already had to happen, at least there's more Torah than ever during the year that's here to protect. And that's why we've seen so many miracles. And Hashem should help, we shouldn't need these miracles, but as long as we do need them, they should continue. It's the only miracles. And I think this has to be a big chizuk in emunah. There's not a question of emunah. It's a big chizuk in emunah. That God said it's going to happen, but I'm going to protect you under the circumstance anyway. It's an unbelievable thing. It's an unbelievable thing. And Elamai, we don't live there and that. Okay. So, it's very simple. If we don't feel connected, so what's left? And if we are connected, then what does it make a difference where you live? That's just a trivial fact. If tonight there's a mother in Israel that's not sleeping because she's worried about her son, so I don't know how people over here fall asleep so well. I just never understood that. It never made sense to me. Something about it doesn't register in my brain, I guess. Maybe I'm naive, I don't know. You could tell me I'm naive, it's fine. But, meaning we're connected. And maybe Dafka, Baruch Hashem, we don't have a war here. So we could do more Torah and say more Tehillim here because we don't have sirens and we don't have to run to bomb shelters. And our Torah will protect them also. And our Tehillim will protect them also. And now it's Shat Milchama, so even those of us that don't say Tehillim at night, according to the Kabbalah, we don't. You're allowed to say Tehillim at night, no question. Chatchila, the more the merrier. Besides, it's almost not applicable. Thursday night you're allowed to anyway, Saturday night you're allowed to anyway, it's then Ziyontav, you're allowed to, and by then it'll be over. But a big victory for Israel, Ezrat Hashem. But of course, we have to be marbebeti, we have to add Tehillim every morning. You go to shul, go to the Chazan after the Shacharit, say a few Pirkei Tehillim to protect Israel. not a joke. And when we say Tehillim, David HaMelech goes himself to protect. It's very important. And we have to feel an obligation. It has to be in our DNA that we're literally obligated to this. This is our contribution to one of our many contributions to what can be done to better the situation. But I'll openly say what I've said in that same speech that I watched, that only a blind person thinks that Mashiach is not by the doorstep, already opening the door. Those were his words. He said, for a few years I said, that's what he said, that Mashiach's by the doorstep. He said, he's not by the doorstep anymore. He's already opening the door. So be blind not to see it. Literally blind. And that also fits very well with the Shavuos theme. David HaMelech, Ruth, right? Mashiach was born through the time of Shavuot. So it's not so far-fetched. We're not so far off. And Koach HaTorah, right? מה יעשה אדם ינצל מחבלו של משיח, יעסוק בתורה ובגמילות חסדים. So Adarabah, יעסוק בתורה, Leil Shavuot, it's a custom at the end of the day. It's not halacha. Right? It's a custom that happened. That because the Jews went to sleep the night before Matan Torah, and Kaviyachol was Ukpeda and Shamayim about that, so many Jews stay up the night of Shavuot. Again, I want to stress, contingent to the fact they're actually doing something productive, otherwise go to sleep, it's a lot better. But yeah, to walk around like a zombie drinking coffee and feeling that you stayed up, that don't make you holy. Sleep, and a yontiv is also a mitzvah. But if you have the ability to actually learn seriously or whatever, fine. So there's going to be thousands and thousands of Jews all over the world. All over the world. Even traditional Jews that don't come to shul so much. For some reason, the night of Shavuot, it's like a Kol Nidrei type situation. Everybody doesn't show up all year, suddenly shows up. It's a big Kiddush Hashem. That Koach HaTorah has a big power. And we have to believe in it. You know, we talk it, but we don't really believe it sometimes. That's why we have to repeat it over and over again. Maybe it'll drill in at the end. Theory, asking, you believe in God? Yeah, sure. Yeah, you believe in the power of Torah? Yeah, sure. Yeah. But still, when you're a little tired, you miss the shiur, and still when something goes wrong, you're angry at God. If you believe in God, what are you angry about? It's for your good. And if you believe in Torah, why are you sleeping? Go learn. So it's lip service. We have to convert the lip service into practical implications, into real things, into something that let's call it something tangible, something that we can hold on to. In the previous generations, there were tzaddikim that gave their lives to protect us. Today, we don't need anybody dying to protect us anymore. And if we did, we already had 45 korbanot a week ago, 2 weeks ago. Shem Yagen. Today, the mitzvah used to be to die al Kiddush Hashem. That was the ultimate thing that a Jew can get to. Today, there's something that's a lot harder. It's to live al Kiddush Hashem. When we walk the street, and we're proud to be Jewish, and we behave in a dignified manner, and we don't get corrupted by all that junk that they're selling us, we're living by Kiddush Hashem. And it's a higher level than somebody who dies al Kiddush Hashem. If somebody who died al Kiddush Hashem goes straight to Gan Eden, somebody who lives al Kiddush Hashem, Mashiach's waiting with open arms. This is the kids that this is the kid that I was waiting for. So Shmuel should help. There should be a productive Shavuot Be'ezrat Hashem. Chag Matan Torah. Gaon says Yom Adin for Talmud Torah also. Get judged how much Torah you'll be able to learn and how much the Shema you'll have in your learning. So it's Kedai. Yeah. In the Sfarim Magdoshim it says if somebody has the ability to be Mchadesh a Chidush on Shavuot, it's a big inyan. If not, at least to learn something new is also a big inyan. It's very big days. And if you can't do it yourself, the least you could do is at least buy partnership shares in those who do study Torah non-stop, and those who, at least that much, at least have a thing. And Hashem should say, "Die letzarot am Yisrael." There's too much suffering. This is, I'm trying to speak, but as I'm speaking, just the thought of what people are feeling right now in Israel, it ruins the will for anything. That's the only place. Just thinking what they're going through. Just thinking what they're going through. To look up to the sky instead of seeing stars and rockets. We're so removed from that because we live in such a different situation in our lives. We can't even relate. We don't even understand what this means. We don't understand what a 3-year-old that knows on their own how to go into a bomb shelter. Our 3-year-olds barely know on their own how to get a yogurt out of the fridge. And even if they do, we don't let them. We're so removed from this reality. But this is the reality of those who are zochet to live in Eretz Yisrael. We have to pray, we should pray for them and learn for them. Hashem should help. This Shavuot should be a very happy Shavuot, that we should have a landslide victory before then. We'll wipe out all these people that want to harm us, and we should be protected and safe forever. Amen. Amen.